Hey guys, just a quick spoiler warning up front. We are going to be talking about season 1 of Lower Decks in this episode. So if you haven't watched Lower Decks yet, just be aware that if you keep listening to this episode, there will be spoilers ahead, which I think start about halfway through. So fair warning, and here we go. Greetings, everyone. This is Brian here with another supplemental episode to tide us over in our mid-season break. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the first season of Lower Decks, the new Star Trek cartoon show. So I'm here, of course, and then also with me is Ryan Sheely, Captain Maddox, and our sound designer.
Hello.
And our chief engineer, Travis Souter, who is Chief Engineer Holden.
And who also does the pre-cuts of the episodes.
Yes, who also does editing for us.
And Grunt as Panther.
That's also true.
Brian broke it.
Was that a cat?
It was me. It was
Being
me trying
a cat?
It was me trying to prevent a cat from doing that.
So you broke it by trying to prevent the cat from breaking it?
Yeah. She was rubbing her chin next to the light, and I just knew in 5 seconds the light was going to go down. So I went to push her off, and in the process knocked over my microphone.
That's perfect. That does not get cut from this episode, I hope, Brian.
Yeah. Anyway, yes, it's the three of us tonight. This is actually kind of a last minute scheduling thing, so other people couldn't make it for scheduling reasons. But that's honestly, that's on Ryan and myself for procrastinating and not figuring this out until today. But anyway, yeah, so Lower Decks. I was incredibly surprised by how much I liked it and how much I enjoyed it the first time through. And then before we sat down to record this, I watched most of season 1 again today, and liked it even more. That was my second time, the first time I had watched it since the original airing, and I liked it even more the second time. And I can't convey how surprised I am that is how I feel about it.
You want to go into why you can't explain that?
Well,
he's a grumpy Gus.
I am a grumpy Gus. Yes.
Particularly a Star Trek grumpy Gus.
I do have high standards for Star Trek. This is true. Yeah. So what I think you're referring to, Ryan, is the fact that I wrote a comedy fan script 10 years ago that's kind of the same idea, also set in the Star Trek universe, but different in certain ways. So yeah, that was always kind of annoying that a very similar idea, but that's the way life works. But the other reason is because of the Hollywood insider knowledge that I have I had dinner with a friend of mine who is an animation director, maybe 4 or 5 months before the show premiered. She was telling me a story of how she was interviewed to potentially direct episodes of Lower Decks, and how she took the interview. She met the team there and wasn't feeling it based on the pitch she was given in the room. She ended up not getting the job and was fine with that. So she told me this way back whenever it was, and I was like, oh shit, that sucks. So I was really prepared to not like it, but I do, and that's weird.
That's so else talk. You're in such an uncomfortable position liking a Star Trek show right now.
It's probably good that we're starting off with Lower Decks, so it gives me a little bit more credibility to discuss my feelings on Picard and Discovery, so I can avoid being everything sucks. Because everything doesn't suck.
Just most things.
Most things suck.
Yeah. I think so I have usually the opposite problem that Brian does when it comes to initial impressions on new Star Trek material, because I lead with my heart when it comes to the franchises I want to love. So I try so hard to love everything that comes out that I want to love, which is why I saw, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull 8 times in the theater, because I tried so hard to love that movie. And it's the same reason why I give the Abrams, the Kelvin timeline more, not a lot, but more of credit than Brian does, and why I give some of the other shows a little bit more credit. But we'll talk about those in a later edition
in due time.
In due time. But this one, I think, is I think Lower Decks was already in a position to have an easier path to success with people who have high standards for Star Trek, because it is such a vastly different show. And it's not vastly different in that, like, oh, we're going from a starship to a space station like DS9. I mean, it's a completely different approach to telling a Star Trek story. And so I think at least I was braced for a different kind of experience. But even still, like the first episode, which I did enjoy, I'm not going to say I didn't, but like that cold open, if you remember the cold open, it just goes so quick. Like as soon as Mariner shows up with her box of contraband, that dialogue between her and Boimler goes by so quickly that I'm like, this is not sustainable. Like, it's funny for a bit, but if this goes for the rest of the show, I'm out. Like, and I got like every joke, but I didn't have the time to laugh out loud at the jokes because they were going so quickly that I didn't want to miss the next one.
Yeah, it was very carpet bomb.
Yes, it absolutely was. So at first I was like taken aback, and then I was kind of put on my heels for the rest of the episode, for the first episode. But I did end up really liking it. And let me highlight the things that I think they got really, really well. That opening credit scene, the opening credits are just fantastic. That was probably my biggest laugh for the first 3 or 4 episodes, was just watching the credits. From the
one shot where it's just going from right to left and the alien hanging off the nacelle,
right? Which was
perfect comedic timing.
Yeah, because it was funny. But then when, like you say, right at the right moment, the eyes sort of shift to look right at the camera. It was just so good. But the font, like, it was the TNG font, and the music was fantastic. And like, my favorite shot in the whole credit openings is when you see the Borg and the Romulans dueling it out, and in one shot it's Cerritos, and they're like, nope,
we're out, we're going.
And then the banana hot coming out of the replicator right after the cold open. That got me real good. So after that, like, I calmed down a little bit. I wouldn't say that I was still not entirely on board, though, because as much as I liked it, I felt like I'd seen it before in short installments of Family Guy. Anytime Family Guy would make fun of Star Trek, like, that's what it felt like to me for a while. Yeah. But I'll get off the treadmill here and give Travis a run. But I'll talk more about why I do really, really like Lower Decks.
All right. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I feel like I love Star Trek just as much as the two of you, and yet I sort of fall directly in between you when it comes to how I approach Star Trek. Sort of of leading between the heart and the head, and how I'm watching it and analyzing it. And that's the way. Like, I'll like something, but I'll find flaws with it, and then I'll find more things that I like about it, and then more things that I dislike about it, and I just kind of end up diverging the entire way. So, like, it's weird. I don't love stuff right away, just based on like the nostalgia factor. It makes me really cautious to love it right away, because I'm like, this is gonna break my heart. But going in it with just a cynical, like, I can't do it enough, so I just kind of end up letting the good things enjoy them, and kind of just going out with it from there. So, but honestly, that's other Star Trek, because like you said, this feels so different than everything else. And I was not on board until episode 3. The first 2 episodes kind of rubbed me the wrong way, which I'm sure we'll get into when we get into more details on it. But yeah, it started very heavy of just carpet bombing jokes, trying to run through. I remember you and I were talking about the second episode, Ryan.
Yeah.
And just the entire episode, I was pre-writing about 30-40 seconds ahead of whatever was happening on screen. Just anything that was happening, I was like, oh, this is how the rest of the scene is going to play out. And then I was bored through the rest of it, because I knew everything that was going to happen. and it was very paint by numbers and very much like the characters weren't interesting. Episode 2 still doesn't hold a lot of weight with me. Rewatching episode 1, it felt a little better. Again, the carpet bombing of jokes. Once you've heard them all once or twice, you watch it and like you just don't pay attention to the stuff you don't have to pay attention to anymore, and
Yeah,
it's easier to absorb the other stuff with it.
I think they age a little bit better because you have a chance to assimilate more of it. So.
Right, pretty much, yeah. But once they get to episode 3, they kind of find their footing, and I feel like 3 through the season finale are just all bangers. They're just so great. And yeah, it just kept getting better and better as the season went on. Like all the callbacks. I mean, we'll gush over it, but yeah, I have difficulty finding things other than like, yeah, maybe it's a little simplistic here and there, or there's a lot of fan service, but whatever. It's not supposed to be some sort of deep philosophical show, so it's like I'm not going to be concerned that they don't have an inner light level introspection on climate change debate. Yeah.
You know what? They might, because the writing improved so much by the end of the first season that who knows. But,
I mean, you could definitely see like a Jurassic Park episode popping up somewhere where it's like you get a handful of episodes into season 2 and suddenly they do something and you're just like, oh man, I'm destroyed. So.
Yeah, I was not expecting that. It's funny because that was actually the kind of comparison I was making after watching the first episode, because I agree with you in the sense that the first episode is very frenetic. It has this kind of vibrating energy.
They're trying
to it.
So hard.
Yeah, well, it has a very like Rick and Morty kind of feel to it, which makes sense because the executive producer came from Rick and Morty. But at the time, I said there's two possibilities. It can either like go, they can go towards the Rick and Morty road, or they can step away, just take a couple steps away from that down like a Futurama road. And if they blend the Rick and Morty and the Futurama aspects together a little bit better, then they're going to have something really awesome. And I think essentially that is what they did. That kind of Rick and Morty frenetic energy is still there, but it's more manageable. It's at a manageable level.
That's interesting.
It gets
to be clear, it's pretty manageable in Rick and Morty though, as well.
Yeah, it's true, but it's more like Rick and Morty is very nihilist in very like fucked up shit is going to happen, and because it just happens, right? And it's kind of dark and bitter in that way, like, which works for it. Rick and Morty is great, but I guess I was worried that kind of bitterness and nihilism cynicism, that's a better word, that cynicism would kind of leak into Lower Decks, as opposed to Futurama, which has a much more not even hopeful, just ironic or sardonic, or it's like, yeah, the world is absurd. It makes no sense. All of this is crazy, but we're gonna have fun anyway. That kind of feel. And I feel like they did go towards more of a Futurama feel later on, and that ultimately it's a great blend.
It definitely fits better for a TNG era Star Trek show.
Yeah.
Well, I think I didn't make this connection until you mentioned it, Brian. But I actually kind of feel like the Orville was the same way. The way when it started way more as a Seth MacFarlane romp, and eventually graduated more towards a TNG style science fiction show. And like, to the people who are fans of Seth MacFarlane, they probably really enjoyed it and then were along for the ride. And for the people who like TNG, they're like, well, this is weird. And then they got on board as it became more of a Star Trek show.
Dude, remember when the Orville was a show? What happened to that?
Well, they just started filming season 3.
Did they?
The pandemic happened is what happened.
Right. It's been so long.
It has been so long. But Travis, you mentioned something that I think is really awesome, because Brian basically looks at this from a pure standpoint of, I'm going to judge this writing on its own merits. And I, Ryan, am going to love it because I fucking love Star Trek, and that's it. And you're like in between. So really, the three of us are Kirk, Spock, and Bones all mixed up. Brian Spock, I'm McCoy, and you're Kirk. Taking both of our opinions and sort of blending them.
I'll take it.
Yeah. That's cool. Somebody else can start talking because I'm just gonna sit on that for a minute.
It's what was I gonna say? I had it and then I was gone.
So what are the things that you don't like about Lower Decks? Like if you could see improvements for season 2, because we obviously all come on the side of we enjoyed this show, we enjoyed our time with it. I'm pretty sure all of us have rewatched it at least once. And so like, what would you like to see it go further?
The only thing I could really think of off the top of my head would be a little less or a little more broad strokes on the winking to the camera stuff. And honestly, that's really just like my Trekkie nitpick, like the universe has to make sense on its own. And not even really that much. Like they talk about Riker and Picard and the Enterprise, and especially since Mariner knows Riker, like there's a history there, it makes sense that would be featured within the context of the universe as a real universe as opposed to a TV show. But like, is Boimler gonna really know who Roga Danar is? No, probably not. So just that. But again, the Roga Danar joke is great. It's a great joke for a TV show, but it's just this like nitpicky Star Trek fan of like, this ensign in 2380 whatever would not know who Roga Danar was, and I'm trying my best to tell that part of my brain to shut up, and
yeah, but if you were an
ensign
if you were an ensign in 23 whatever, you would know that joke.
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't that memorable of a mission, really. It's honestly one of the greatest examples of the Star Trek trope of, hey, we're gonna show up, fuck up this planet shit, and then move on. It's the Hunted TNG episode, The Hunted, for anybody who's curious, where they show up, planet wants to join the Federation. Turns out they have a terrible dark secret, of course, that is sort of allegorical for a modern social issue, which is they have a bunch of soldiers that they don't really know what to do with, and so they put the soldiers in prison, even though they're not criminals, and that's a terrible social thing they got to deal with. But like, they literally, the Enterprise facilitates a coup,
a revolution,
and gets to the point where the establishment and the rebels are in like a Mexican standoff with each other in the capital. And then the Enterprise just picks up and moves the fuck on.
But you know what's funny? To your point, Brian. So I like to pretend like I know as much about Star Trek as Brian, and I do. But if I don't know who Roga Danar is off the top of my head, then it's probably going to go over 90% of the Star Trek fans out there. And I do know who the character is now that the setup is there. And I'm upset that you're telling me this now, because we had an episode in Tempest where we were trying to beam somebody out, and you said, okay, well, this is going to be an opposed task. And I rolled my eyes because I wanted to make the Roga Danar joke, because he's the one who like fights his way out of the transporter beam.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Like, what are you doing?
How is transporting an opposed task? Oh, there is that one example in The Hunted. I couldn't think of the guy's name, so I didn't make the joke. But there, so now I have made the joke. So
which is actually funny, because I think that's mission 3 you're talking about, and mission 2 came from one of the compendium books. Like, the mission is one I pulled from a book, but I changed some elements around for it to better fit our particular canon. One of which was I changed it to that episode's planet. That the planet from the planet from that TNG episode is the planet you guys were dealing with in that mission.
Good.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, they seem to have turned out okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it seems like it was fine. Good
Yeah.
job, Enterprise.
so Ryan, if you could change something, if you were something that you could imagine improving on going into the second season.
You know, I honestly can't think of anything specific. I feel like there is potential for the show to be better, but I can't really quantify why. I laugh at the show every time, and I enjoy the fanfare and the fan service like a lot, but I do feel like in some sort of abstract way they could be blended together. I guess it kind of goes along with what Brian was saying. Like it could just be blended together a little bit more. They could streamline a little bit better so that it flows, because it seems like they do a really good job of telling a story, and then it's just like cut Star Trek joke, which is fine because they're in the Star Trek universe. And like I said, I'm enjoying it, and I don't have any particular problem, but I can just feel in my bones that there's something there that can be. It's you know it's in its first season, and as such, it's the best Star Trek show that's ever existed in season 1. So
honestly, that's absolutely true. Even just judging on the criteria of as a Star Trek show, like leave the comedy aspect out of it or the animated aspect out of it. It's just the best well-written Star Trek
season 1,
first season of television that any of them has managed to do.
So I expect I expect what it is weird, and I expect whatever my poorly defined examples of what could be improved on will be improved on, because anytime you go back and if this thing runs for 10 seasons, we're going to go back and look at season 1 and be like, oh man, that's rough.
Yeah.
So I expect it to be ironed out.
And one of the things that makes me think that is it also does a really great job. First of all, one of its go-to joke formats is my favorite joke format of all time, and I always love, which is you take the trope from whatever genre your thing is in that really doesn't make sense in the real world, and then you show it not making sense by a real world thing happening. Like the perfect example is when the doctor runs up to the captain and says, "I think everybody's being changed one by one. Nobody knows who I am." And it turns out she was just on the wrong ship. And she says, "Well, these ships look the same." Like that is the quintessential joke that I love. But it also is actually asking some pretty good questions that Star Trek that doesn't generally ask itself in the form of those jokes. And what I mean by that is, in the first one, when the first officer beams up and he's infected, he becomes a zombie apocalypse, and then they fix everything. At the end, they make him better, and he goes, "How many people did I eat?" He has a genuine moment of horror at
how much flesh did I eat?
At how much of his colleagues he consumed in the past several hours. And it's played as a joke, but it's actually like it's an honestly real genuine point.
That would be horrifying. Yeah,
Star Trek,
but they never address her. I mean, they glossed over it here too. It's not like they didn't gloss over it.
But they glossed over it with a purpose. Like they acknowledged it and then made it a punchline and then moved on. Just like TNG would be like, "Oh yeah,
he's all better now."
Captain Picard was tortured for a week and a half by the Cardassians, and he has a quick conversation in the ready room with Troy, and now he's fine.
Or like even more closely similar to the Lower Decks point, Worf ate the helmsman's face off, and that doesn't ever really come up again.
That's a really good point. God, I love Genesis. That's a great episode.
But it's very much that trope of like Worf ate a fucking guy and never really got mentioned.
So one of the other things that like they do a couple of things that I love really well, and I think it was in the second or third episode when
hold on, I'm gonna do my thing that I want to see improved.
You go. Sorry,
I want to jump in there because like I said, we're gonna gush nonstop, so I'm fine with that. I would say the one thing that I felt was sort of lacking in season 1 was a sense of the crew. Like there's some good personalities there, but they all felt like very individual personalities. Almost always they were paired up with someone, and it was always Mariner and Boimler and Rutherford and Tindy.
Tendy.
Yeah. They're always kind of off in pairs. The only time we really ever saw them interacting was like at the end of the episode when they'd all kind of show up in 10 forward and kind of hang out for 5 seconds before the credits roll. So I'm curious to see how all that plays out. They tried to do some of that in the later episodes, which is like, again, I'm hopeful that they will do more of that. I just want to see it feel more like a crew as opposed to just a collection of characters on a ship, which is what it currently feels like to me.
Yeah.
And you know, it's certainly the smallest cast of primary characters in a Star Trek show so far, because it's four. It's the four of them. You know, it's Boimler, it's Mariner, and Rutherford, and what's her name again? One more time.
Tendy.
Tendi. Yeah.
And Mariner's mom. I'd put the captain as a major.
Kinda, but no. I mean, it doesn't follow the captain though. It follows those four. So it's like, I feel like in all the other Star Trek shows, yes, you follow the captain and the first officer and the science officer or whomever else is the primary characters, but there's a lot of crew all the time. And so maybe they will focus more on the upper decks in lower decks later on, and therefore get to expand.
Well, not even necessarily that, but it's like you mentioned, it's a smaller crew, and yet how much have we seen like Boimler and Tendi interact? Like, is there any relationship between those two characters? There is. I know that they do come in contact a few times, and like, but like again, it's just not much there. It's 4 characters that we follow as opposed to 4 members of a crew. And like I said, it started to feel that way a little further as we got along, but I think that's the only sort of shortcoming is like it felt very much like they weren't really a crew yet.
I will say this though, and to push back a little bit there, is that we've gotten 5 hours of lower deck so far. That means 10 episodes, half hour each, you know, so. And
it's also animated, so maybe it's a little tough to like build that emotional connection when you're not having like actors portraying them and whatnot. So
sure, in real time or on live screen. Yeah.
I mean, voice actors do a ton, and they're doing great work with them. Like I think they're all impeccable.
They really are.
But yeah, just building sort of those relationships. Again, I mean, it's also could just be a byproduct of constant joke fest. I mean, who like really feels like Family Guy is an actual family, right? Like,
I'm just curious as to. I imagine that this was basically a pilot season for the show, and based on its success, we'll see what happens. But you got to figure in upcoming seasons there'll be more than 10 episodes, because that's a really short animated season run. So,
I mean, no, that's normal, isn't it? At this point,
it's normal now. Back in the 90s,
10
like
episodes,
23.
Like right now, 10 episodes is normal for a cartoon.
Yeah,
like
a half hour.
10 episodes for most things. Yeah, I mean,
it's pretty standard. 10 to 13.
For most things. Back in TNG's days, TNG, DS9, Voyager, they were all 22 to 24.
It was crazy if you think about it, man.
No, it's actually an issue with the Writers Guild. I don't know like where exactly it stands now, but it has been an actual issue where like the way writers are paid has had to be changed, because if it's by episode, writers are making a shit ton less money than they used to.
Yeah, sure.
Because you're only getting paid for 10 episodes instead of 20 something. So, I think.
Is there any update as to renewal? And I mean, I'm sure there's a season 2, because I want to say that I saw that already, but I don't know if they have more than just the one.
I haven't heard
one extra season.
Don't know. I would honestly, I would expect it to fare even better than everything else, because animation is one of the things that adapts to pandemic conditions a lot easier than anything else, because everybody can work from home on their computers and stand in separate sound booths and whatnot, as opposed to 100 people being on set at the same time.
Did either of you guys catch the CBS Star Trek Day that they had?
No.
Oh, the coverage of it was pretty cool. I was watching it for a lot of the day, and they did have the cast of Lower Decks on, and it was really awesome to see them interacting, because they just have a blast together, and it's fun to see that. But B, they did record a lot of, I don't know if it was a lot, but they recorded some of their season in their house. So like, the guy who plays Boimler, the actor, he's in The Boys. I can't remember his name.
I can't remember either.
Yeah. Sorry, that guy. Anyway, but he points behind him to his closet, and he's like, "That's my recording studio back there." And
Jack Quaid.
Jack Quaid, that's the one. Yeah, I see his name now in the blue TNG font, and I love it. But yeah, so they recorded from their homes, and so that's a really good point that it would sustain during the pandemic if nothing else would. So
I remember seeing an interview with Jack Quaid just before the show actually premiered, and they were kind of discussing with all of them. Oh, also fun fact, the guy who plays Rutherford is Donkey Doug from A Good Place, which just makes me real happy. Yeah.
No way.
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wait, no, not Donkey Doug. Sorry, Pillboy.
Okay.
Is his friend.
Donkey Doug was in an episode of The Mandalorian, and that was real hard for me to get past.
But so Jack Quaid was doing an interview, and they were talking, and he's like, "So when you're acting, like, do you think that like you relate to Boimler? Like, does that is he a lot like you in some way?" His response was, "God, I hope not," which is so great.
A point I was going to hit on earlier about how I got excited when Brian was saying one of the jokes that they pulled off, one of his favorite types of jokes. Mine is when they do. It's along the same lines where it's self-referential in like a more obscure kind of way, not the blatant kind of way. But like there was a really quick moment at one point in one of the early episodes where Boimler is in the turbo lift and he's just humming the TNG theme to himself real quick before somebody steps in.
Yep.
It's just a couple of bars of it. And and when I saw it, I got both. I got excited. I laughed because I thought it was funny, and I was also a little bummed because obviously Lower Decks is going to have a much larger audience than Tempest, but we made that joke like a couple weeks earlier when we released our second episode. when Eel was flying the shuttlecraft and going
I think we should write Paramount a letter.
Yeah, we should write them a cease and desist.
Yeah,
that'll work out real well.
The other moment I loved was when the first officer is it Ransom or Ransom? Ransom. When Ransom
in the demands,
was in like the arena sort of situation with that huge alien on the crystal planet, and the only way he fought the guy was by clenching his fist and he just kept calling out his double-fisted shots during the fight. Oh, it got me so good. I love those moments.
Oh yeah, there were a lot of fun moments. I wanted to flip through the episode list because I haven't watched it recently, so I was like, man.
Well,
when Boimler gets caught in the phasing as the transporter, just let out that absurdly loud noise. Everyone was annoyed by.
And that's actually a great example of the show like getting me real worried about what it was going to do, and then actually turn it around and reveal it as like, no, this actually does fit what Star Trek should be, and doesn't do a cliche that would be really dumb for Star Trek, which is the whole Boimler goes on that ship of misfits, and it's going to go to the colony or whatever, and it's all dark and doom. It's like, oh, it must be a secret terrible extermination camp or whatever. No, it's not. It's fine.
It's just the dude likes the lights low. What do you want? Which, like, those types of jokes of really telegraphing something like that can also land flat, right? But they do a great job of they take the setup seriously, which is what you do when you actually want the joke to land. A lot of people, like, if you want to make that joke, you get lazy with the setup. You don't make the setup straight up. Like, it seemed like they were going to go, like, take him to the farm. And like, you bought into that because they bought into that when they were doing it all the way through the episode. Then in the very end, it's like you earned that punchline, which is great.
Yeah, that's a great point. In order to tell that joke, the setup has to be just the thing. Like, you can't make the setup itself a jokey aspect of the punchline, because that doesn't work. It's stand up or set up, and then the punchline, and the setup has to be the same setup. So yeah, they did a really good job of not telegraphing that stuff. but like really playing on those tropes so you're able to see and recognize them for what they are immediately, and then being able to turn that around into whatever else it is. One part where like they do it over and over again and I'm still not tired of it is whenever Tendi reacts the opposite of the way you think she's going to react. Like something horrible happens, she goes and then she loves it. She always loves it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like I would expect, if you told me that was a thing in the show and I hadn't seen it, I would tell you, oh, that sounds annoying as fuck. Oh God.
Yeah.
But it works and I love it.
That has everything to do with the actor's performance, though. Noelle Wells, I think. She's fantastic. You can feel how happy she is when she's delivering her lines, and it's just perfect.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's just the earnestness of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like you do that, and if you're doing that as the joke, it's annoying. If you're doing that as the character,
right.
It's not. It's like there's a sincerity there, and it's like now when there's a crazy situation and Tindy's about to say something, like you know that she's just going to be excited and love it, but rather than like knowing that ahead of time makes you feel annoyed by it, like instead you're just excited to go on that journey with her. You're like, heck yeah.
Yeah. It becomes endearing as opposed to, it becomes an endearing person as opposed to an annoying writing element, right?
Yeah.
As an annoying line in a script. So
yeah, which is what they do so well.
Yeah, and it's remarkable that an animated series, an animated comedy half-hour Star Trek show has managed to do that better than not just the Star Trek shows, but most shows in the modern era are able to do.
They've also had, for me at least, a couple of like gotcha moments from a pure Star Trek fan perspective. The biggest one comes in the season finale, which we'll talk about. I'll talk about in just a second. But the other one was, I think, in like the 7th or 8th episode. I think it's Veritas, when they're held on trial. But before you know that they're on trial, you see they're in this circular thing and this tube that's sort of rising up. And I look at Tara, I was like, they're in a Klingon trial right now. This is awesome. It turns out it wasn't, but they played that hand. Like they totally set it up for people like me to go, oh my God, they're in a Klingon trial for no reason. And they got me good. I love that.
And then, and still managed to play it off as a joke, but also a genuine, valid story element, in the sense that, okay, so they flip it around and it's a birthday party, not a trial. But the characters themselves are like, okay, come on, guys.
This looks just like a trial.
Platform and the whole thing and the beam and the tub of eels. Like, come on, this one's not on us.
Yeah.
Just that,
and that's why I think that kind of thing works.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because I mean, it allows you to still tell the good story while poking fun at the thing that we all love, but not doing it in like a mean way. Like it does it in a way that you're like, okay, yeah, no, I get that, and
it does it in the way that when, like, anytime we all get together and put on an episode of TNG, we are mocking the hell out of that show the entire time. All we do is make fun of it. I mean, that's half the impetus behind Tempest.
And it's all just jealousy because we wish we were there.
100%. And I would be lying if I said there isn't a little part of me that is like resentful of Lower Decks for doing it first and like capitalizing on that.
Except the humming to himself thing. We did that one first. So, because also we are all clearly the first people to ever have made that joke. Star Trek capacity.
When you factor in production time for animation, we weren't first.
We released it first, baby.
Yeah. It's funny because they actually do the exact same joke in Stargate, which I rewatched earlier this year. And it's cute in the moment they do it, but I think they mess up in like staying on it too long and drawing too much attention to it. Where in Lower Decks, you get 2 bars. If you're not really paying attention, it won't register at all. Yeah,
if you're half watching, you'll catch it the next time you half watch.
Exactly. And in Stargate, they like make sure that they center that joke long enough. Yeah. So like it's definitely a joke that exists, and Lower Decks still did it better than it's usually done.
So actually, I know we're going to get to the finale, but I guess I had one other question. Since Brian, you just rewatched it, when was the last time you've watched the episodes, Ryan?
Well, in preparation for today, which by that I mean starting
Today.
about 5 hours ago, I tried getting as much as I could in under my belt, and I got through the first 3 episodes. I think I've just today as my rewatch attempt, but then life found a way to interrupt. But I
As it
have
does.
seen the finale, I think 2 or 3 times, and
So I actually have a question about the episode before the finale, Crisis Point number 9. That's the one where where Boimler creates the holodeck program to try and like practice with everybody, and and Mariner like hijacks the program and becomes a pirate and like
yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah,
and
turns it
everything.
into a therapy.
I've
Yeah.
only seen that one once.
Okay, so I watched that a couple times because I watched them all a couple times when they were releasing. I would throw them on. I'd watch them like seriously the first time, and then generally waiting for the next week episode. I'd watch it a couple more times throughout that week. Um, that episode, I didn't fully buy. Like, I still don't fully understand or grasp what the breakthrough she was because they try to play this off like she's a goof and she screws up on purpose because she doesn't want to move up, but it's mostly because she's sort of afraid. But at heart, she's really a Trek nerd, like all of us, right? Like that's sort of the niche of that character. And that episode is supposed to sort of be her breakthrough into accepting her role as a good officer. And I didn't really fully get how that transition was supposed to happen because she just acts out a ton, then fights herself. But I didn't understand like where that revelation was supposed to hit, and I was just wondering if you guys got that somewhere that I missed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did. I think the key is like attaching it to the relationship with her mother, right? Like she acts the way she does because she's essentially rebelling against her parents in general, and particularly her mom. Because when she's fighting herself at the climax of that episode, it's all she's talking about is how her mom is too hard on her, never lets her be do her own thing and like prove on her own that she's good at anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in that fight where she kind of realizes, oh, that's where all of my rule breaking and all of my coloring outside the lines comes from, is the desire to break away from that. And once she's able to realize that in episode 10, in the last episode, she and her mother are able to work together, actually effectively. So I
I
think
mean,
if you tie that to the relationship with her mom and her behavior as a like rebellion against specifically her mom, I think it works.
okay, yeah, I think I got caught up with the dialogue between her and the character of her, right? The hologram was supposed to be
Yeah.
like an AI that's designed, but the AI is like fighting to protect the ship and fighting to protect her mom because obviously she still loves her mom and she is trying to be a good officer for him. And like those two debating was weird because it was like you should be learning something from this idealized version of you in some way. And like the conversation that they were having at the time just felt really weird and out of place. But again, I have not watched it in a while, and I don't think I've watched it since seeing the finale. So maybe it'll click the next time I watch it with that in mind.
I'll have to watch it with a keen eye next time because, like I said, I've only seen it the one time.
So the finale.
And how
How
about
great
that
was that?
finale, huh?
So good.
And another great example of fan service, like that pure uncut fan service, but that is actually built in earns and is still a genuine payoff to the episode, to the story, completely otherwise, right? Like it's not. What I think the failing is a lot of times is the actual story, whatever it is, isn't put together with all that much thought, and then the fan service at the end is supposed to be this amazing whatever that ties it all together. But the problem is the actual story itself wasn't all that great, so the fan service feels cheap and unearned. But here, the story could actually stand on its own two legs. If it, instead of the Titan, it was some other random ship,
Some other
the
flagship.
Sacramento or the Lexington or whatever, fly in, the story and the episode at large in general would still work. And that's why the fan service works, because it doesn't need, it's not relying on the fan service to the exclusion of its own story.
That was the other moment. Obviously, I was referring to earlier when I said what the gotcha moments. I was squealing. It was like I was 8 years old again, and Picard had just grabbed Data's arm and said, sleep, Data. I was older than 8 then. I was about 13 at the time then, but when was regardless,
I don't
I
know.
was
We're
feeling
old
like
now.
a kid because I was so excited. It was just like watching the old Next Gen. That's like the place it got me. And when you see the Titans swoop in and save the day, and then you hear Jonathan Frakes, and then you hear Marina Sirtis,
Yep.
and they are as they're willful participants.
They're so
in
happy
this
to be
farce.
there.
Exactly. it was joyful participation in Star Trek to have a whimsical take at those characters, and it was just everything it needed to be. It was lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
I started the episode, and me and Keely threw it on while we were just kind of watching in the living room, and I legitimately sat up because we have like a really nice couch, but we also got it because it's just the most comfortable thing in the world. So it's very easy to just kind of like lay back and sort of sink into the super soft couch and kind of relax, and that's what we were doing. And then the opening happened, and right before the credits, they literally murder an entire starship just straight out.
Yeah.
I was quite literally sort of like lounging and laying down, and I like sat up and actually like sat in my couch and kind of was like, oh shit, they really just did that.
It was
And watched the rest of the episode like just locked in, because I was like, that is
100%.
something they just took it straight seriously and just went, this is what's going to happen. And it felt like it was a ship getting destroyed with consequences, which rarely happens in Star Trek in any way, shape, or form.
And then the jumping off point from that was the Cerritos was next. Like it was like that. That's what you mean by the ship of consequence. Like it was. You felt the sense of danger. Like okay, but would they really do anything like that crazy? Probably they won't do anything that crazy. And then they killed off Shax, and it was like, what is this show doing? This show has consequences. There's like who's safe, and you don't know, and that's amazing.
Yeah, it was so good.
It was,
and that's another great example of it going sort of down the Futurama road, where like, yeah, it's a cartoon, yeah, it's funny, yeah, it's taking all of these tropes that we know from serious things and having fun with them, but there's still real emotional stakes for these characters and what they go through and the choices they make and yada yada yada. I will say though that a major strike against the finale episode is the fact that the Solvang has a registry way out of whack of what it should be. It's like 11,000 something, when if it's brand new, which they explicitly say that it's brand new, it should have something in the 80,000 range, and that's
I think it was 110,000, Brian. I think you misread it.
No. 24th century registries are 5 digits. And it's definitely 5 digits.
Oh, well, in that case, let's cancel this show.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
That'll be the next letter to Paramount we send.
Yeah. Dear Paramount, I don't know if you realize this, but you need to fire whoever.
They probably did that just to mess with you, actually. It's probably like they're smart enough that they probably
they wrote it and they were just like, no, we should change that. We should make it wrong.
You got to have something for these people to go nuts about. But going back to killing off the security chief, it's not like Tasha Yar either. It's like Tasha Yar was, and they later on explain in world, in universe, how meaningless of a death that was. But like to see Shax go down having his best day
epically,
the whole season is just him wanting and he does.
Yes.
He goes down the happiest man he could have gone down. It was wonderful. It was
I also love the sort of sneaky way that the show really has 4 principal characters, the 4 ensigns that we follow in Lower Decks, but they clearly put enough emphasis on the senior staff so that when they do that, it's this weird combination of meaningful because of the head of security that you've sort of seen around and doing stuff. It feels meaningful that they killed him off, but it's also like does nothing to the core of the show, right? Like they were able to earn this emotional moment of a strong supporting character getting killed off, but it's also like really doesn't change anything that the show has to worry about long term, which
Yeah,
is just a really well written way to do that.
it's brilliant. Yeah.
Like it takes away the idea of it's just some red shirt that we're doing to prove the situation is serious.
Yeah,
So
it's like another great and often used Star Trek trope, which is we're going to introduce this character and they're going to have an actual
this
dialogue
episode,
scene in the cold open. Yeah, and then they die off, and everybody's really upset about it, and then nobody ever mentions that person ever again. Yeah, so again, they managed to avoid that. Take a Star Trek trope that doesn't really make sense and actually turn it around into something that's not only funny, but also actually genuinely emotionally effective and good storytelling all on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, can we take a moment to highlight the fact that there is a dude out there in the world right now who, in like the early 2000s, I think, won a contest to design a starship to go on the cover of some books. Like they were going to make some Captain Riker on the Titan books because they mentioned it at the end of Nemesis, but we were never going to actually see it on screen. And so, okay, we'll let somebody out there design the ship, and that ship will go on the cover. 15 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And then 15 years later, it's on screen, and it's a
screen.
canon ship.
Yep.
Like,
that's cool.
I
Good for that person. I don't know who it was, but good for them.
yeah. I mean
Yeah.
that must have been an insane like feeling for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, watching that air, like that must have been crazy.
Yeah.
Well, we probably should be wrapping
We
it
should
up.
try to find that person and ask them.
Yeah, well, maybe we could do an interview. That'd
Yeah,
be fun.
that would be fun. But I will, before we wrap up, I will say that I don't think it's too much to say that was one of the best season finales in all of Star Trek.
Yep.
I definitely put it behind Best of Both Worlds. I can't think of another one off the top of my head that is immediately as good as that one. I mean, there are some good cliffhangers and there are some good season enders, but that one's right up there.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's definitely up there.
All right. Oh, great. I think that was an awesome discussion, guys.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty good at this.
Yeah. Probably not.
Yeah, no, we're done.
I'm sure it's just like the other 50 that are out there of similar types. So
Yeah.
hopefully the people who enjoy Tempest also enjoy this
Yeah.
as well.
Hopefully we'll see. All right, anyway, thanks for joining me tonight, guys. Thank you for joining us tonight, faithful audience. Join us again next week, where we'll be doing another supplemental episode and then a few more later on, and we will be talking about Star Trek Picard and Discovery, as well as some other things related to both the Tempest campaign specifically and kind of role-playing games in general. So we're going to try to cover all three of the major buckets of what the Tempest is.
Also, at some point, if we can tease the fact that we will be having one of our Patreon listeners on one of the supplemental episodes.
Yes,
as a guest.
Yeah. So I think we still have to figure out if it's going to be the next one or just an upcoming one. But we're going to have one of our listeners on who listens to the show but is not a huge Star Trek fan, and basically let her tell us anything she finds confusing about the world or any questions she has about the lore or the Star Trek, the intricacies of Star Trek canon.
And how Tempest relates to it.
Yeah, and how Tempest plugs into all of that. So I am incredibly looking forward to nerding out about that.
And you're the only one.
Yeah. Actually, we might as well now, since we're here, put out a call of, if you're a listener out there and there is any kind of question about the lore of Star Trek Tempest or Star Trek in general, or how they interact or where they plug in, whatever, send us an email at starshiptempest@gmail.com, and we'll try to cover as much as we can on that episode. And until then, you can follow us on all of the social media apps, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all the rest, under the handle of Starship Tempest. We also have a website, starshiptempest.com, and a Patreon at patreon.com/starshiptempest. So thanks very much for listening, guys. Until next time, we'll see you out there.
We'll see you out there.